13 years. Cell phones were 12. What about the World Wide Web? What do you think?
5 years.
Close, you guys are good. 4 years. iPod, 3. Facebook, 2. YouTube, 1. And Angry Birds. How long did it take Angry Birds to save 50 million people?
No.
1 month.
A month.
Very close, 35 days.
Pokemon Go?
Yeah,
it's probably
yeah, 24 hours. So you can see how rapidly things are changing and how far-reaching it is, because the World Wide Web obviously is going to be more accessible and reach more people faster than a television, which God knows it was expensive at the time. Now Canada has, I think, some of the highest internet usage in the world. And this, I didn't want to put the stats in here because it's not, I think, as important to you as some of the other stuff that I'm going to talk about, but it's actually quite staggering. So it's fairly good assumption that everyone in Canada has access to the internet, and you don't need as much money as perhaps you needed to buy a TV when TV first came out, right? And for things to catch on, you can advertise things in a more far-reaching way now, right? But Dr. Larry Rosen is the one that I got these stats from, and he has YouTube videos and he's written books. He's basically one of the people, one of the big players who's talking about how technology is shaping culture. And one of the things that he talks about too is how the generations are shortening. And they're sort of more connected to what's happening technologically than other things. So for example, a generation was what, 25 years? So now it's like 10. So you hear about the I generation, the C generation. So people are being defined basically by what technology was out in the era where they were growing up, right? It's really interesting. Have people heard the term digital natives? So Mark Prensky came up with this term, I didn't. Digital natives, digital immigrants. What's a digital native? You're born with technology. Born into a world with the World Wide Web. Born into a world with this technology. You take to it like a duck to water. I mean, I see my 4-year-old nephew knows how to work my iPhone better than I do because it's intuitive for him. It's my, I'm like, I didn't know you could do that. I was like, oh, wow. I just see him sort of whizzing around. And just how they use their iPad. I saw an ad once that was hilarious. It was like, I think it was a little baby opening a paper magazine and they're like, why is it working like this? They put an iPad, they're like, that's not the technology used. We read our magazines online though. People are going to things like Next where you're subscribing. It's much more convenient, right? And that's where people are. Meet them where they're at, right? But I grew up at a time where the internet was being introduced when I was already an adult. So I kind of look a little bit more like this. Okay, like not everybody does. I'm a social worker. Technology is not how my brain works per se. I don't love it as much as some other people. There's definitely digital immigrants that are fabulous with technology and love it and take to it. It's a generalization, but I think it's a really important distinction to make because it also shapes our values about technology, how it's used, what's worthwhile doing, what's not, how to use it. So for example, what do you think youth's #1 preferred method of communicating with each other is? Texting. What do you think in person is? 5. So I might have a judgment about that, right? Like if something great happens to one of my clients and he texts his parents rather than telling them in person, I might think, why, like it's so impersonal. Like I will have judgments about that because that's not my go-to thing, right? So it shapes the way we view certain activities and whether or not we would use it that way. And so Larry Rosen actually talks about how something major happened to him in his life. He texted his kids, he emailed his wife, and he phoned his mother. So he knew that all of them would be comfortable with different types of technology and he met them where they were at, right? So I think it really depends on what your exposures have been and to think about how that does shape your evaluation of your young person's online activity, whether or not what they're doing is worthwhile, whether or not, they're not your real friends, they're online. They don't make that distinction, right? We make that distinction. You've never met them, how could they be your friend? Well, I've been playing this game with them and chatting with them actually about the most personal stuff in my life for 5 years. I have clients who the closest people, I said, who's your confidant, who's your go-to person? A guy that they've never met. Because it feels safer to talk to them, right? There's maybe less implications, they don't have to worry about gossip, it feels easier to say something online than it does face-to-face, there's all kinds of reasons, right? So that whole value, they're not your real friends, that can be a huge divide in terms of the conversation between parents and youth and between a counselor speaking to youth about it, right? So being aware of your values and comfort levels. So Our culture, you might want to, shift over here because I have to stand here and I'm going to block the whole screen for you, so feel free to move if you want to, it won't be disruptive. So our culture, when our culture looks like this, how do we define what normative or healthy behavior is, right? It is so ubiquitous and so common for families to be on their phones at the dinner table, or for people to be out and having their smartphones out. And it actually, in fact, now we're like it's almost part of the way we socialize. We're maybe showing somebody something on our smartphone while we're out socializing with them. So then how do we convey to young people what's okay and what's not okay? How much time is too much? It creates difficulty doing that, right, when it's so ubiquitous. So for the next bit, I'm going to talk a bit about what the prevalence rates are. I'm not going to spend a ton of time, but just to give you a sense of what's out there. Understanding the issues better, what's the problem, and what the risks are. So why did two people, both exposed to the same technology, one develops a problem, one doesn't? So what makes you more likely to develop a problem? Strategies to respond, what resources are out there for you, and then if questions are burning along the way, you can ask them, and hopefully if there's time at the end, we'll have more. Anything that you feel I've brazenly left out? Seems like it's why you came? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Okay. So prevalence rates, in the USA, there are about 8 to 14% of youth have a problem with gaming. In Ontario, there's a huge study that's done, the biggest of its kind, across Ontario with high school age students. And it talks about all different kinds of behaviors: bullying, drug use, mental health, gambling, gaming. So these are the 2015, the latest, because the study happens every 2 years. You can find it online. And it's very local, so I thought it would be relevant to you. So in Ontario, 10% of students spend 5 hours or more gaming a day. 10% spend 5 hours more gaming. That doesn't include other screen time. 25% of students play video games daily. 1 in 8 have gaming problems, so some kind of problem associated with their gaming behavior, and boys are 4 times more likely than girls to have a problem. You're nodding your head, that doesn't surprise you. Any ideas why? Why are boys more likely to have a problem with gaming than girls?
Competitive.
They might be more competitive. What else?
I think girls like social interaction and just talking more.
So girls might value...
They probably like texting and things like that.
Yeah.
Friendships.
Yeah,
So
so,
boys, that's how they interact on.
Right. So girls might value socializing in a bit of a different way. They might be more prone to use social networking sites versus games. Yeah, that's all true. So boys also, because of spatial relations, they tend to be better at them faster. And so when you're good at something quickly, you tend to stick with it. It'll level out over time if girls keep playing, but because they're not as good at it as quickly, they lose interest. But it's not only that. When you think about the themes of games and the nature of games, they're marketed more towards the boys' interest. I mean, it's not to say there aren't girls that have problem gaming. There are. But they do tend to do other things online excessively, like social networking. But within social networking sites, like Facebook, there's games. There's Farmville, there's other games, right? So it is kind of hard to parse out, but we're talking about the kind of the classic traditional video games like World of Warcraft, real-time strategy games. That's what we're talking about. So this question is a big one, and parents ask me it all the time. How much is too much? How much screen time should they have a day? So pediatric societies in Canada and the States used to recommend for 2 and under, 0, nothing. For 2 and above, older children, so everybody else, 1 to 2 hours. Like, is that even possible in 2016? When you go to the Esso station and there's a screen while you're putting in your gas? So screen time includes TV, smartphone, laptop, desktop, everything, right? And often people are doing more than one thing at once, and school.
As well, the stuff they do in school.
Yes. This is screen
So
time.
you're saying it's 2 and over?
And
Yeah.
turn over.
So I can go to work and see I can't have more than 2 hours of screen.
Yes. So this like.
Hey, if you get away with that, you're gonna be
Yeah, let me
know.
So if you're like halfway there after this presentation.
This is how my son lost his confidence in his pediatrician. She told me 1 hour of screen time maximum a day, TV, video games, and he's 14.
Yeah.
And he's going like, well, she knows nothing.
Yeah, you lose credibility when it's not even humanly possible, right? We'd all have to quit school, quit our jobs, like be buried under a bunker somewhere. But they've made an amendment because they recognize technology is so ubiquitous today that it's actually not possible. So they've made an amendment and they talk about context and environment. That actually it matters more what you're doing and where you're doing it than how much you're doing it, right? So there isn't a number, but I think people know when life starts to become unbalanced. And one of the ways that you know is that there's negative impacts on your sleep, on your relationships, on your school. So those are the benchmarks, right? So what they started to talk about, and you can find all this stuff online, ironically, is, because I mean, technology's not bad, right? I'm not saying it's bad. You just want to have a healthy relationship to it, or as healthy as possible, right? There's lots of good that can come from it. It's how we find a lot of information, connect with our loved ones. So the idea being that they make sort of recommendations around parenting. So having some tech-free zones, having some tech-free time, positive role modeling. Like if you're pulling your phone out at dinner, how do you, and then telling them to stop, you know, so that kind of stuff.
That happened yesterday.
Yeah. Did you get in trouble for pulling out your phone?
We tried to do the 1 hour a day thing,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no devices allowed at the dinner table.
Mm-hmm.
And get a really important email from a client, and I'm pulling out my phone, I'm how to answer this, and sure enough, my boy says, there's no screens at the table.
He's like feeling pretty good about himself.
He's 11, and I said, you're absolutely right. I had to put it up. I had a terrible dinner. I was worried about responding to that person.
So this is the thing, like all of us, are you a surgeon?
No, I sell wine for it.
Okay, so I just say, we all have like a misguided impression of how important we are, right? And how important these calls are. But we live in a time where we're all expected to be accessible 24 hours a day.
That's it.
So it's about an expectation that has been set culturally and societally that make us feel like we're on the clock, because everybody knows you saw it. Everybody knows you heard it. But you can train people. I turn my phone off at dinner. Call me at 5 or call me at 7. Or I'm gonna have to, you know, you can train people. If somebody's not gonna die, you could probably negotiate it, right? But we have this sense of urgency, all of us do. Someone's gonna die, oh my God, like nobody's gonna die. Ask yourself that question, is somebody gonna die if I don't answer this call? So, because it is very difficult to role model something for your kids that and then you're asking them to do something different. And I think it's important to register your own discomfort with it, because it might help you feel a little bit more empathy towards them, right? I lost my smartphone once. I thought I was going to lose my mind. I felt like I lost my world. I was like, I don't even know my parents' phone number. Everything's programmed. I don't know anything. I don't know how I'd find people anymore. So I think it was important for me to feel that sense of panic. It's important for me to sit in my car, hear my text go off, and have to resist the urge to answer it. And I'm like I'm dying, and then I check it and it's like Groupon. I'm like, it's not important. But it's this, we're all conditioned behaviorally the same way. Alerts and buzzes and rings make us all go, what is it? And we get a little reward when we check. We get a little spurt of dopamine that goes off every time we see a 1 at our inbox, our red light flashing, our thing vibrating. It's not innocuous. We are behaviorally trained by them. And so are our children. So if we feel the tension and the stress and the difficulty resisting, how about a youth who that's their way of connecting with their friends, their way of knowing what's going on, and they have less impulse control because their brain isn't as developed. So it's not an easy thing to do, right? And I think we all experience our own anxiety around it. People have phones on their desks. Why are your phones on your desk? You do! What's going on over there? Do we need an intervention right now? But you know what I'm saying? We had a life where our phones were on our desks. What is it exactly that you think you need? Is it using your clock? What is it? Do we ask ourselves those questions? I work in a team and our phones, we work in a technology overuse program. All of our phones are in front of us. Why are our phones in front of us? We're in a staff meeting. None of us are on call. None of us are doctors. Nobody's dying. We got a phone there. We got a Groupon might email me. I need to know. So it's interesting culturally what's sanctioned and what isn't. We're at a time where we haven't maybe made a lot of rules about this. We go to the movie theater and they have to tell us to turn our phone off. Wow, really? It's disruptive to other people. Really? We couldn't figure that out, but we won't. Because it's too tempting. I want to know who's emailing me and texting me while I'm watching this movie. Really? Wow. So I think we need to practice delaying our own gratification. And it can make it easier if you turn off alerts for a time when you are saying you're not going to be using tech, or you're not supposed to be using tech, right? Because then you're not going to be prompted by those alerts, and you can establish those same things with your youth. So think about not so much how much, but what you're doing online and where you're doing it. Not all activities are created equal, and not all activities are as harmful, right? So that's something to consider. So when you ask youth why they game, this is what they say. Fun, obviously not gonna do it unless they find it entertaining. They like to feel in control. It's a highly tumultuous time of life where maybe you don't feel that in control of a lot. Your future is unpredictable, there's a high level of uncertainty about your own identity, about the world, but you know what's gonna happen in the game. It's pretty predictable. So for a kid that's more anxious too, that's gonna even have more pull, right? It relieves tension, it relieves boredom. I'd say one of the #1 reasons, now keep in mind that this is a section of the population who have already identified that there's a problem. The #1 trigger for them to start gaming was they didn't know what else to do. I'm bored, I don't know what else to do. And I thought, oh, that's interesting, you don't know what else to do. So when you meet an adult person with, let's say, a gambling problem, they probably remember a time in their life before the gambling became problematic where they had other interests and hobbies, and they can draw on those experiences and revisit them. If you're talking about a very young person, they may not have cultivated those things at all. So that you're asking them to pull away from an activity that they find super compelling and go to what? Nothing? So I think one of the protective or preventative factors and good strategies to respond to a problem is to help your youth cultivate other activities, find other interests, do other things with them, expose them to different things so that they can decide what they find interesting or not interesting. So nobody's saying they can't game, they shouldn't be online. That's a personal familial decision. It's probably pretty impossible. They can be abstinent from certain things. They could not play a particular game that they have trouble with, which can be abstinent from technology. That's not possible. So it's about really kind of helping them cultivate balance, right? But they have to have other options. It's going to be extremely difficult to get somebody to stop doing something if they have nothing else to do. So that was very striking for me when I've been working in groups with young people. So they develop gaming skills. There's a lot of respect and status that come along with gaming. You're ranked. You might have particular powers. You might get respect from your peers. It's highly competitive, and you can see how you're doing relative to other people. So if you're good at it, you can actually garner a lot of esteem from it. And if that's not happening, that's compelling to anyone. But if that's not happening in other parts of your life, it's going to be even more compelling. So they feel a sense of mastery. They feel good at it, and they like feeling good at it. And they like the idea of being able to get better. And it provides them with escape. And when life is tough, who doesn't want to escape? So it serves a lot of functions. So when is it a problem?
Sorry, I was just curious, on the last screen there, are those all the lists why boys are 4 times as likely?
Well, I'm sure that there's some overlap, but I'm sure that there's some overlap, but I'm sure that there's things that girls would like to feel too. They might just get those needs met in a different way, and gaming is a great way to get them. So maybe it's just the boys have a better product to be able to get those needs met,
The
right?
picture there too, so.
But I don't necessarily think that these things are endemic to boys. Like I think that certainly girls would want to feel some of those things too, and they might get it a different way, and it might be healthy or unhealthy, right? I mean, wanting some of these things are not unhealthy. It's how you get the need met, and are there consequences to getting your need met that way, right? Most of us want some of these things. So when is it a problem? So I can't give you a number. 6 hours a day, it's a problem. 6 or more, it's a problem. Now, there are criteria, diagnostic criteria, in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the latest iteration of that book, which is what psychiatrists use to diagnose mental health and addiction issues, does not have it as a formal diagnosis. It is up for consideration. So internet gaming disorder is up for consideration, which is actually hugely significant, because you don't even make it in there for consideration unless there's a substantial amount of information and research to support that something's going on. But there still isn't enough. But we're not going to wait until the American Psychiatric Association says, yeah, it's a problem, to start seeing people. There's problems. We all see there's problems. They've been coming for treatment for 8 years. So, but I think it's just a bit of a snapshot to tell you where we're at with it in the sort of in the research field, right? Mm-hmm. So the list of that diagnostic criteria that shows when it is a diagnosable problem is on the handout for you as you leave the door. And it's very similar to any addictive behavior, right? Things like tolerance, I have to do more of it to feel the same way. Preoccupation, it's all I want to do, all I think about, all I talk about. Withdrawal, when I can't do it, I feel agitated. Those kinds of things. And it's on a continuum. It's not like you have a problem or you don't. You can have a small problem with gaming, where maybe your grades have gone down a little bit and you're kind of fighting with your parents, or you could have dropped out of school because of it. So it's on a continuum. We look at it as a potentially problematic behavior, that you might be having problems with gaming, but I don't label people, you have an internet gaming disorder. Because I think it can be highly stigmatizing. It could be, actually prevent people from wanting to go to treatment, because they think if they go to treatment, they're admitting that they're an addict. So I'm very careful with addict language. Sometimes parents will come in and, he's an addict, you know? And so, well, what do you mean by that? What kinds of things are you noticing? Okay, so there's negative consequences, and then I do a lot of psychoeducation about it, because it can actually backfire a little bit, right? So I think it's fair to be a bit more descriptive about it. There are some problems that are resulting from excessive technology use or from your gaming, and this is what I see, right? What do you see? I ask the kids. I know what their parents see. They're very clear about what it is they're concerned about. And when they're not in the room so much, I'll say to the kid, are you concerned about any of this stuff? Often they're not. They're concerned about their parents bugging them all the time. So that's where we start. That might be their motivation. They didn't come to treatment and go, hey, I want to talk to you. Their parents dragged them in by their coat, right? So that becomes the problem. So the problem that you're having is your parents are always pissed off at you. Then there's a problem, right? So they have a differing opinion, and it also could be because at that point they're so protective of the behavior, because it's meeting so many other needs, that they don't want to acknowledge that it's a problem, because it means they have to change. So we have to loosen that up a little bit. It's a slow process. We have to talk about it. So if I just go in like gangbusters and like, okay, well you better cut it down to 2 hours a day, it's just not how we work with people. We work at increasing balance and health, and trying to find out for the youth what their concerns about it. And if they don't have concerns about gaming per se, what are their goals? And what's the relationship between their goals and their gaming? Because if they say, I want to be a doctor, but they're gaming 10 hours a day and their grades are in the gutter, those don't line up. So how can we align those goals a little bit more? So that gives you a little bit of a snapshot of what it looks like when they come seeking treatment, and what the disparity is often between what the parents think about the situation
But you
and
shouldn't
what the
just
kids
limit
think.
it. You
Pardon?
shouldn't just limit it. That's what, it seems to work well when we do that. When
Oh,
we-
yeah.
When we have that 1 hour limit, he seems to want to do other stuff. And all of a sudden, he's
Yes.
a nicer kid to us.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, so
Wants to do-
you're bang on, you're looking already, you're talking about prevention, right? So now it's prevention is worth a pound a cure. You have limited it potentially before it became a problem.
no,
And it
no.
forced him to find other things. Oh, so it was becoming a problem, and
But
then
he
you
seems
limited
to
it.
do well, even like he fights it for a little while, he seems to.
And then he stopped.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
9, he's only 9.
Yeah, but prevention is huge. If you have to, if it is much easier,
Not to have.
it is much easier to not have it than to have it and then take it away. And it's much easier to deal with it when it's this much of a problem than when there's this many consequences as a result of it. Because then you're doing all this damage control and it becomes a vicious cycle. So you cause more damage, you want to escape even more, you go back into the game. So it's a very vicious cycle. So you really, really do want to start as you need to go on. The younger the better. But at any point, it will probably involve limit setting. At any point, it will.
But how do you get them to, when they get to be older, teenagers, you want them to learn to have that self-control themselves? Because you don't want them to go off to university or whatever, and then they're just online all day. with their
Well, it's
parents.
scary, right? Because you're like, oh my God, if I'm not here, what's going to happen? It's going to be like you're going to be eating Cheetos for dinner and not sleeping and never doing your homework. And sometimes that happens if there are other difficulties, like executive functioning issues that haven't been addressed, life skills that they don't have. They might be much more, and no limits with their game, they might be much more likely to escape into that, particularly if they go away to school, which is what we see, it's very common. So kids will be at home doing okay because they've got parents who are case managers, right? They're like making sure they get to sleep at a certain time, making sure they get off to school, eating their meals, doing all those regulating things for them. And then they go away to school and all hell breaks loose because nobody cares if they're in class, nobody's making sure they're going to bed, etc. Maybe school's a lot harder, maybe they've coasted by in high school because they're smart, and then they go to university and the work is harder. And they don't have the study habits or the behaviors that support doing well at that level, and everything comes crashing down, and the parents find out after the first semester that they failed all the courses. That is a very common presentation at ChemH. So the reality is that if you anticipate that your child is going to be one of those people because they have no ability to self-regulate and lots of bad habits, you want to start setting them up for success at home by helping them, making sure they have good study habits, good sleep habits, role modeling those things, setting limits around their technology, teaching them that it actually makes sense to get your schoolwork done before you game. Gaming's leisure, it's not work, right? So, but at the end of the day, when you're not there, you don't know what they're gonna do. You kind of have to hope for the best because you've laid some good groundwork at home. But if you think your kid doesn't have the self-control or the skills to regulate themselves away, then maybe they shouldn't go away to school, right? Not every kid is suited to being away from the family, but you want to try to foster as much skill for independence as you can prior to them leaving, and that's around decision making. But if your kid has developed a problem with gaming or has no ability, like they're not going to self-regulate. They're at a developmental stage where they're not going to self-regulate. They're more gas than brakes. Until you're 25, your brain's not developed, so your impulses are going to be stronger, bigger. Your ability to think through consequences aren't as they're compromised. So they're going to need coaching and guidance and support and good role modeling.
If I tell that to my son, who's now in grade 9, all the things you're telling me, what I've learned from you, would that even go in his head?
It depends on how you say it.
Yeah, like if I plant those seeds, will that stay there? He's got
That's a really good
ADD,
question. Yeah.
and he's a coach, like he coaches kids,
Mhm.
like that's what he wants to do.
Sports, coaches good sports.
Sports.
Yeah, it's great.
And actually, I think he coaches people online in gaming.
That's great, so you've got a kid that has leadership skills, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a problem online, is that like, he's like the guy that's gonna teach you how to play these games.
Yeah, so he's got some status. He has an important
Yeah.
role. So, I mean, I think that it depends on the kid, right? And it depends on what other strengths and risk factors
Because what
they
you're
have.
telling me is what a coach or a trainer would know ahead of time when he's gonna be teaching his stuff. So I'm wondering, would he, if I told him what you're telling me, would that make a difference?
I don't know, I think people know your kids better than I do, and I think some kids would take heed and some kids would dismiss, and it would probably also depend on what their relationship was to technology. The more dependent they were on it, the less likely they'd be to listen to what you have to say.
Would they use that against you, knowing it? Like,
What do you mean?
well, he's very manipulative, like he can.
I honestly, without knowing your son,
Yeah,
would be
okay.
irresponsible for me to
Okay, I'm
answer those
sorry.
questions, because I think
Yeah.
it is so kid dependent.
Mhm.
But I'll talk a little bit about communication in
Okay,
a minute,
thank you,
or
sorry.
a bit later, and that might help clarify for you, if you were to say anything at all, how might you say it in a way that would be heard best?
Yes, thank you.
I think that's a really good point, because I think I'm constantly thinking, because I have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, now 11-year-old as of Monday. But I think about what they do when we talk about, and I got a 2-part question, is that how they're spending their time on the technology. And it's almost like the evolution, because I hear my mom saying, Tiffany, they're spending way too much time on there. But then I'm thinking, like, my daughter's shooting videos of her dancing around the family room on Musical.ly. And like the technology that enables kids to express themselves creatively
part of our
has
lives,
changed,
yeah.
right? Instead of dancing
She's a
off-
digital immigrant.
She is,
Twice
absolutely.
removed.
So she's dancing and sharing her videos,
Yeah.
and she looks like she's singing, Adele. And like, that's so cool. So how much of it is,
You're asking when, what is bad, what is good?
well,
how
like,
do you-
is
how
this
do
just
you-
the
how do you-
evolution of how kids express themselves now versus what a problem? And then if it could be growing into a problem, to what degree or what equivalent of pre-Cam age is there to say, okay, well, that's cool, but if she spends too much time on this, or, look out for these signs, like, she'll drop her iPod.
It's confusing, like,
Yeah.
because to me, when I hear what you're saying,
Yeah.
is, okay, well, 20 years ago, if your daughter was really into photography, you'd
Yeah.
think, hey, that's pretty cool, I like that.
Yeah,
But because it's with this,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Now
So
it's a concern.
it's not clear, is
Their
it?
homework is always
Yes.
online, middle school and high school.
So
So
this
you
goes-
just cannot differentiate, like she's doing assignments all the time on the laptop and she has maybe a chat box open on the
Yeah.
side, that's a distraction.
Yeah.
And,
you looking at?
and
She's in the room. I think we're getting hung up on the technology piece, because the leadership piece, that's critical, like, that's huge, that's great.
Yeah.
Should we work with it?
So what
But
you're
yeah, it should be,
Yeah, but
it's
we
not
don't
just
know.
the way it is now, right?
Because
Yes.
this
my
is
son
really,
coding.
really hard to balance.
Because I think that he's good at that, why not
So
work with
it
it?
goes back,
That's him.
absolutely. So you're hitting on some really important points, right? culture is changing. It is so ubiquitous. It is so connected to the way they do school, express themselves, communicate with each other, that then how do you evaluate it?
Yeah.
Where you're like, oh my gosh, am I letting something happen that could potentially turn it? Am I letting something happen that could potentially turn into a problem? Should I be limiting this? I don't know, because it seems part good and part, I don't know, maybe bad, I don't know. And I think that that is the challenge of parenting in the digital age. So I think the fact that you're asking the question is fantastic, because it means you're on top of it. It means you're going, okay, so she's doing this, so what does it mean? What purpose does it serve? Is it only technology? Am I seeing any negative consequences? You're evaluating it as you go. Rather than just letting it happen until there's a huge consequence as a result of it, and going, oh, I guess I should have done something. So what you're always looking at is there balance in your child's life? Are they engaged in the family? Are they tending to their responsibilities? Do they have offline friendships as well as online friendships? Because the virtual world and the real world are always interacting. And it's how young people are communicating with each other. It's how I'm communicating with people. I went to Africa. I was on Instagram. I was posting all of my pictures so that my friends could follow the trip. Is that bad? Interestingly, what I noticed is that I was very excited to get home and do it, and maybe sometimes I was doing it at the table where my whole family was there and I was maybe not talking to them. So the whole idea is that these behaviors have consequences on a continuum. So was that a little bit rude that I was doing that while my family was sitting at the table, and maybe, you know, at one point will I regret not being present for them, but being online because I wanted to show my friends where I was? Maybe, but I think that's the thing. You need to be thinking about it and evaluating it, and you are. So, and then you can make decisions based on that, because the decisions are not catch-all decisions. They also have to do with the values of your family and what you want your family to look like and be like, right? So it's, I can't impose that, say, yeah, you know, that's really helpful, because I think it's also informed by values, right? So, and what you think is important. So it sounds to me like she loves dance and singing, and why wouldn't you promote that? I think when you need to worry about how much is too much is when you're starting to see potential problems or negative consequences, like skipping meals, missing sleep, disengagement from the family, only doing things online. When you start to see it tipping and it's no longer balanced, that's when maybe it's a cue that this isn't
The
healthy
mental
anymore.
piece comes in, it worries me, because I hear my daughter will say, thank you so much for all the likes, and, you know, and I don't, like, I sense that she, and it worries me, because she feels she gets bullied at school, and she doesn't get bullied when she's doing a video and everybody likes it, so I don't want, that's what worries me.
Yeah. So that's a fabulous point. Okay, we live in an era of likes, and how many friends you have online is important. Approval seeking behavior. And it's not innocuous. When we get little alerts, we have a little dopamine. When we get likes, we feel good about it. And then you also mentioned another risk factor, right? If that's not the experience that they're having in school, but they can find that experience online, it's going to make it even more compelling. So you've noticed a potential yellow flag. You know that maybe there's some stuff happening at school and that she's getting some social reward online. I think talking about it is really important. Like, what does that like mean to you? What does it really mean? But none of us are immune to it. Like to pretend that I don't care when something, I'll be like, why did I only get 9 likes? You know what I mean? But I think we all need to unpack that, because
It's got 9 likes.
only 9. Can you believe my other friend got 40? But I'm in my 40s, and I recognize on some level that it matters. I have the cognitive ability to process that and go, really, you know. But she doesn't.
No.
So I think that that's where parents can be wonderful guides. That you start to see these trends and you say, you know, what does that mean to you when someone likes it? And, you know, just having a conversation about popularity and fitting in, and it's such a good opportunity for that, because we do live in a world of like emoticons and likes, and that how many Facebook friends you have matters. And so helping your kids kind of understand that better, you know?
What do you recommend? It sounds like you're saying, well, they create time for actual face, is sort of a formal time. All right, this Tuesday at 6, so we're going to have a family discussion on issues or something like that. Do you need to
I think it depends on the family. I think
casual,
it might be easier if something comes up in that
comes up,
moment, because she's bringing it to you, to use it as a teachable moment.
Yeah.
And then there might be times if you feel like something warrants a longer conversation or affects more people in the family, to have a sit down about it. But I think kids generally do better when it's short and sweet rather than long and heavy and formal.
Okay. That's my experience.
Yeah, so trust your gut. You know your kids. If your experience is they pay attention to you better in this context rather than this context, do what works. Doesn't matter what I say.
I'm sure you're going to cover this, but what this lady at the end said, and you, was at a PIC conference 2 years ago, and the keynote speaker, his message is all about tech. And his key message is get comfy with tech right now. Find out.
It ain't going anywhere.
It ain't going anywhere. You get yourself comfortable, then you will be able to guide your kids
Yeah.
if they need guidance.
Yeah. I think it's helpful if you're completely in the dark about it, which most of you probably will not be because you need it for your jobs. But there's like, you know, a little bit of light and a medium amount of light on the subject and a lot of light. You're not gonna always know about every single new development in technology. I mean, we've gone to Instagram, now we're at Snapchat. It's like hard to kind of follow the trends. And so if you're not sure, ask your kids. Show me your apps, tell me what they do. I wanna learn more about it. Usually they'd be all too happy to tell you, right? There's other stuff, but kids are smart. Like, it's not different than, it's different in terms of what the medium is, but it's not different in terms of the behavior. There were all kinds of sly ways that we would deceive our parents when we didn't want them to know what we were doing. And now, so there'll be like the Facebook account that the parents know about and the shadow Facebook account. The Instagram account that's, you know, in their name and the Instagram account that's not. I mean, kids they're smart, right? So, you know, but if you know, or you have a supportive home, you're informed, the lines of communication are reasonably open, you're teaching them good values, you're kind of got the risk factors on your mind and you're addressing things as they come up when you see your kids kind of moving in the wrong direction or getting into some kind of, you know, gray area, chances are they're gonna be okay, right? A lot of times these are blips, you know? They're not necessarily gonna be full-blown lifelong problems. But this is the latest challenge. So it used to be unprotected sex, drinking and driving, drugs. What are the things parents used to worry about? Those are the conversations that parents used to feel like they needed to have with their kids. Now we need to have a conversation about tech use, right? It's a different conversation. So how to stay safe online, not posting pictures, how much to use, what to use, how to use it, that kind of stuff. Asking about their online experiences. What things do you feel like you need to warn them about, right? In the same way that you have a conversation about protected sex or whatever, you know? So I think parents can feel like they are at a deficit if they feel like they don't have a clue what's going on with technology. So you need to have a clue. Are you gonna be an expert? Are you always gonna be ahead of the curve? No, it'd be hard. But you can try to stay on top of it as much as you can, right? Sorry, we have about 10 minutes left and I have the what to do coming up and it'd be really mean to tell you all the problems and then be, okay, good luck with that. You're aware of how bad it is, but I'm not gonna tell you how to fix it. But I'll stay a couple minutes if you wanna ask me after. So defining the problem, I think we've sort of talked about what some of the negative impacts could be and that they can happen on a continuum. It's not like you have a problem or you don't. You can have problems with different degrees of severity, but often what we see is there's impact in their social functioning, work, school, relationships, psychological, do they have higher rates of anxiety and depression, and some addictive symptoms such as preoccupation. It's all they talk about, all they want to do. They need tolerance, they need to do more to feel the same, loss of control, using it to escape, being agitated when you can't get on it. That's how it's defined. So there's risk factors in different domains, right? Biological risk factors like heredity and temperament, but also sociocultural, their peer group, are they being bullied? What's the culture and role modeling in the family? The larger societal culture, psychological, anxiety and depression are probably the biggest mood mental health issues that go along with this, and it can be a chicken or egg thing. The anxiety and depression could have led up to the problem, but they are also exacerbated by the problem, because if there's all these other negative consequences and a fair amount of social isolation, you can experience mental health issues as a result of that, or have them reinforced by that, if that makes sense. So these are the folks, if you've got two kids, both have exposure to the same technology, the ones that will develop a problem, these are some of the attributes that they may have. They may have one or more, usually more than one of these issues, because you could also see how if you have one of these, you might have the other. ADHD, many of my clients have ADHD. They feel symptom relief when they're online. They can hyper-focus on things that they're interested in and tune out all the other noise that often overwhelms them. Anxiety, depression, autism spectrum disorder, particularly what was formerly known as Asperger's, so high functioning autism. Very difficult time reading social cues. Often they're experienced as odd by their peers and bullied. It feels much safer and predictable to interact online. Other excessive behaviors, so that might speak to impulsivity, low self-esteem, social difficulties, and above average intelligence is a risk factor for a gaming problem. Learning exceptionalities in general, so learning disabilities and having above average or being gifted, or both.
Why?
It's different for learning disabilities than learning exceptionalities. So often kids that are gifted, for example, might have other social quirks that make them not so popular and effective at school, so online becomes a safer space. Some of these games are very challenging to play, and so you can't, they're fairly complex, so they appeal to a particular brand of intelligence, and people with high intelligence tend to do well in them. So those are a couple of pieces. Learning disabilities, those kids often have a very difficult time at school, and it really shapes how they feel about themselves. It can, I'm not saying everybody. But if you have a learning disability, diagnosed or undiagnosed, you don't do well in school, you feel incompetent there, you're on a game and you feel competent there, it's going to be a much more preferred activity. So I think there's a whole host of psychological and social reasons why that comes to be, but that's what the research says, and that's kind of what I see in a nutshell. And often it's up to 4. When we did a sort of file review, many of our clients have 3 or 4 of these things going on at the same time, because they're interrelated, right? If you have ADHD, you're more likely to have depression and anxiety, for example. If you have ASD, you're more likely to be bullied and then have low self-esteem. So these things, they're not mutually exclusive. And they're not determinant, right? I'm not saying if you have any of these things, you're gonna have a gaming problem. They just put you more at risk. So I think that's an important thing for parents to think, like, are they getting support around these things? If they're not doing well in school or in particular subjects, have I tested them for how they learn and process? That kind of thing. You get it? Okay. So signs there might be a problem. I don't think this is gonna surprise anybody, right? Long time on the computer, school problems, skipping chores, disengagement from the family. That's what they spend their money on, it's what they spend their time on. You're in conflict with them about it, get off the computer, no I don't want to, go to bed, no I don't want to. Social isolation, they tend to withdraw. Often they're spending tons of time in their room, not so much time with their offline friends if they had offline friends before. Few other activities or interests. Their world shrinks down to this one thing. And they appear down, anxious, and irritable, in particular when they're not online. So what makes it addictive? It's not an innocuous thing, right? Not everybody develops an addiction with it, but not everybody develops an addiction to cocaine that tries it, right? Our brains are built differently. But there are qualities about gaming that actually make it addictive. They're achievement oriented, there's a ton of socializing that happens, the games are infinite, they never stop, so you want to keep playing because there's no end. There's in-game currency, so you might spend money to get a 1 in 7 chance of winning a particular power. So there's investment there, right? The brain gets hijacked with intermittent rewards. These games are designed with care. The same people that design slot machines design video games, and soon they're going to be the same. Slot machines are going to be like video games are going to be like slot machines, not all of them, but that's the direction it's going in. And it hijacks their brain. Think about all the chemicals that might be taking place if you're winning, if you're fighting, if you're achieving, if certain sounds or things are happening at particular times. Intermittent reinforcement is the most powerful kind of reinforcement, and that's what games are built on. And then you're talking about developmentally, people that have less impulse control, and if you have the other risk factors, it's kind of a perfect storm, right? So there's some complexity here. So, and the virtual world continues when the person is offline. So what am I missing out on, right? When I'm not there, stuff is still happening. So the games are not all created equal. The most addictive games are MMOs, so massively multiplayer online games, where you're doing things with different people, socializing with them by chat or on a headset. You're working in groups to form particular tasks. You have a particular role on the team. You've made a social commitment. There's different social pressures related to it. Those are the most addictive, so World of Warcraft being one of the most famous. So what to do, right? It's not an easy thing. I mean, you're sort of touching on the complexity because it's so much a part of our world. You might see that it's meeting a lot of social needs that your kids have. All their friends do it, et cetera, et cetera. So what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to stay connected. If there's a problem, and this is all you're talking about, then your relationship is no longer balanced. And then it doesn't have the protective qualities that a connected relationship would have. You need to have time where you're not talking about this, where you're just having a good time with your family. And that is protective in terms of mood. When you're having a good time with people that you love and there's affection and positivity flowing between you, you release oxytocin. It's preventative against things like mood and anxiety. So that connection to you and still having a positive aspect to your relationship is really important. So communication, very important strategies. So this might give you a clue of if you're going to talk to them about this because you feel like it's important. There's a way to do it at this age, and actually it works at any age. Partners, parents, try it out, it's really good. So the whole idea that briefer is better. Now parents feel like, oh my God, I have his attention, I have to tell him everything I want to tell him now because he's not going to let me talk to him for another month. So it's like blah, 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 and they're like, they've tuned you out after like sentence 2, right? So it's about doing what works. I know that you might feel the anxiety to get it all out, but it's not effective, right? So brief. You want to give them little commercials at a time about what your top priority is, and only one thing at a time. Choose the right time and place, not while they're gaming, not a good idea, right? They're totally engrossed, they have something they need to accomplish, other people are expecting them to accomplish it, and you're taking your time to talk to them about why they haven't taken the dog out, the room's a mess. So you may even, depending on their age, want to ask them, hey, I want to talk to you within the next 24 hours, when's a good time? And then you have the conversation. iMessages, I'm concerned about your gaming because I've noticed X, Y, and Z, rather than you need to stop gaming, you have a problem, you never listen, makes them less defensive. Present focus, we're going to deal with what's going on right now, not the litany of things that I'm upset about from the last 5 years. So the whole idea, they say this about couples counseling, the whole idea you don't say you always, you never, you don't bring up stuff from the past, it doesn't feel fair, it's too hard to deal with 20 things that have happened over the last 5 years. More positive than negative. So for every one negative thing that you're saying, 5 positives. It's very hard. So, but they say that with spouses. These are transferable communication skills. But I think the short and the mutual agreed on time, not the guerrilla warfare tactic where you go into their room and you're like, blah, 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 and they're not prepared for you. But but the idea of short, it'll disarm them. They're not used to just like, that's all you're gonna say to me? Okay. Like, it's more manageable, right? But for every 1 negative, 5 positives. Not necessarily at the same exact time, but the idea that negative stuff has more emotional resonance for people. I mean, I get 40 positive evaluations. One person says one thing and I'm like, oh. It's just how our brains work, right? So you have to balance it out with more. And it might feel hard to find. Like if your kid has developed a pretty bad problem, there's a lot of things that they're not doing or a lot of things that you're worried about, it can feel really hard. But it's remembering the things that you love about them. They probably still have positive qualities. Maybe they're great with the dog. Maybe they're good with their little sister. Maybe you like the way that they, did something that day, whatever.
And session B has now ended.
Okay.
We invite you now to join us
So-
for light lunch. And special thanks to tutors for generously donating the sandwiches. Please
You get
make your
sandwiches.
way to the 2 tables in the hallways that are identically set up to serve you lunch. When you get your food, if you could please take it to the auditorium to eat. Dr. Richardson will begin his talk at 1:15.
Yeah, until 1:15. So just to say, I'm sorry I rushed you, I just always tend to value questions that come up rather than slides, because then I'm responding to your particular needs, and you also may feel like you missed something. So just to say that the communication tips that I was going to address are actually on that handout, as well as the diagnostic criteria for internet gaming disorder. And so you can look at that there, but it's essentially really talking about how limits are important, but so is reinforcing them. Rewarding healthy behavior and implementing consequences for breaking whatever agreements you've made around limiting your tech use. Because if you don't, they're not going to self-regulate, and expecting them to, particularly once they've had a problem, is pretty unrealistic. But if you keep saying, you got to do this, but there's never a consequence if they don't, then it's going to fall on deaf ears. So, and the whole idea that it's the hardest job in the world and you have limited support. So on that list, there's lists about gaming in particular. There's resources about gaming in particular, but there's also some parenting books that have been vetted that really are about fostering healthy relationships with your kids and good communication. And so our family therapist at CAMH has read those books and recommended them. So I'm hoping that those will be a resource to you. And I'll be here for a couple minutes if you want to ask me questions, but other than that, thank you.